Did you know that in just few minutes, you can go from the birth of America to its rise as a global superpower? Today, we're going to dive deep into the key moments that shaped the history of the United States, from the first colonists to the modern-day challenges it faces. Whether you're a history buff or just looking for a quick but powerful overview, this video is packed with the highlights, pivotal moments, and key figures that made America what it is today. Stick around till the end. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Ready? Let's jump in. Before Europeans arrived, the land we now call the United States was home to hundreds of indigenous nations, each with their own rich cultures, histories, and societies. From the complex Mississippian culture to the nomadic tribes of the Great Plains, Native Americans had been thriving on the continent for thousands of years. But in 1492, Christopher Columbus landed in the Caribbean, and Europe took notice. Over the next century, Spanish, French, and English explorers and settlers began establishing colonies along the eastern seaboard. By the early 1600s, the English founded their first permanent colony at Jamestown, Virginia, in 1607. This was the beginning of what would become a series of 13 British colonies stretching from New England to Georgia. For the next century, life in the American colonies was shaped by agriculture, trade, and a growing sense of self-reliance. But tensions between the colonists and Britain started to build up in the mid-1700s. The British government, deep in debt after the French and Indian War, began imposing taxes on the colonies. The Stamp Act, the Tea Act, and other taxes sparked anger and protest. The most famous of these protests, the Boston Tea Party in 1773, where colonists disguised as Native Americans dumped British tea into the harbor in defiance. By 1775, the situation had escalated to open conflict. The first shots of the American Revolution were fired at Lexington and Concord, and the 13 colonies were on the brink of war with the British Empire. The American Revolution was not just a fight for independence, it was a struggle for the ideals of liberty, self-governance, and freedom. Under the leadership of figures like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin, the colonies formed a continental army and began battling British forces. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed, formally breaking ties with Britain and establishing the United States of America. The war continued for 7 long years, but with the help of France and other European nations, the Americans secured a decisive victory at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. The Treaty of Paris in 1783 officially ended the war and recognized American independence. Now that the United States was independent, it needed to establish a government. In 1787, the Constitution was written, creating a new system of government with checks and balances. 2 years later, in 1789, George Washington became the first president. But the new nation wasn't without challenges. Tensions between political factions, the issue of slavery, and the nation's expansion westward all posed significant problems. The War of 1812 between the U.S. and Britain tested the young country's resilience, but America emerged stronger. Throughout the 19th century, the United States expanded westward, driven by the belief in manifest destiny, the idea that Americans were destined to spread across the continent. But this expansion came at a cost. The question of slavery divided the nation, with the southern states relying on it for their agricultural economy and the North moving toward industrialization and abolition. By 1860, tensions reached a breaking point. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president, southern states seceded from the Union, leading to the start of the Civil War in 1861. After 4 bloody years of conflict, the Union prevailed, and slavery was abolished. But the scars of the Civil War would remain for decades. In the late 19th century, the U.S. transformed from an agricultural society to an industrial powerhouse. Railroads, factories, and steel mills powered the economy, while cities grew rapidly. But this period, known as the Gilded Age, was marked by corruption, inequality, and labor struggles. The wealth of the few stood in stark contrast to the poverty of the many. The early 20th century saw America take on a more active role on the world stage. The U.S. emerged as a global power after its involvement in World War I, and during the Great Depression of the 1930s, President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal sought to provide relief to struggling Americans. In 1941, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. entered World War II, helping to defeat Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. By 1945, America was not just a victor. It was the world's leading superpower. The Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union dominated the second half of the 20th century, with the world divided into two ideological blocs. The U.S. fought proxy wars in Korea, Vietnam, and elsewhere, while also racing to the moon during the space race. Meanwhile, the civil rights movement fought for equality for African Americans, with leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. pushing for an end to segregation and discrimination. In 1991, the Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union, and America stood alone as the world's sole superpower. The 21st century has brought new challenges. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, led to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the 2008 financial crisis rocked the global economy. But America has also made significant strides in technology, culture, and politics, shaping the modern world in countless ways. Today, the United States continues to evolve, facing both old and new challenges, but always holding on to the ideals of liberty and democracy that have defined its history. From its humble beginnings to its status as a global leader, the history of America is a story of perseverance, innovation, and change. Thanks for joining us on this whirlwind tour through time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating journeys into history. See you next time.